Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Chris Jones, who is Executive Vice President, Industry and Services at Descartes. And today we're going to talk about home delivery performance, ticking time bomb or market opportunity. So delivery has been part of the order fulfillment process for forever, but it's only been in recent years that it has emerged, from the shadows, if you will, from being a cost center and back office or back end process to becoming a competitive differentiator and a key driver of customer experience. And everything can go perfect on the front end of the sales process, but a poor delivery experience can quickly negate it all. So how do consumers feel about home delivery today? Why does delivery performance matter for retailers and delivery companies? And what are delivery personas? And how can retailers, leverage them and use them to improve customer loyalty and revenue? Well, those are some of the questions we're going to discuss in today's episode. It's great to have Chris back in the program to share his insights and perspective on this topic based on some recent findings, research findings from Descartes' second annual e-commerce and home delivery consumer sentiment study. So, Chris, welcome to the program.
Great. Thanks for having me, Adrian.
So, Chris, the last time you were on the program not too long ago, we were talking about another Descartes research study, which was on supply chain logistics innovation. And now you're, come out with a brand new study, the second annual one on home delivery. So you definitely stay busy in doing market research. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, our view was we wanted to get the perspective on, what's really shaping home delivery. Like you said, it really does matter to consumers and ultimately to retailers. And you were right, but the last mile is the last word, right? We do a lot of work with a lot of retail companies and see a lot of different activities, but we wanted to get that 360 view. So that's why we went and did the second study.
Great. Well, we'll include a link to the study for folks to download it to get more insights on it. We're probably just going to scratch the surface of what the results show, but maybe it's a way to get started. I mean, the big picture, right? So, I mean, how do consumers feel about home delivery today? I mean, overall, are they satisfied or dissatisfied with home delivery performance?
Well, I would say it's really very much of a mixed bag. Just some good examples. With the, I'll call it slowdown, not necessarily decline, but slowing growth of e-commerce. I think retailers and delivery companies have had a chance to catch their breath a little bit. But even so, if you will, the sentiment in terms of people being satisfied improved, but it only improved a couple points. And unfortunately, here's the metric that really will drive people crazy, which is 2/3 of the people that were part of the study have had a delivery problem in the last 3 months. And so that's not a great sign, right? That shows you that there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I can count myself as as part of that. I mean, I think to me the biggest frustration to this day is still the very large delivery time windows, right? So we had something delivered and they told me it was between 12 and 5, right? So a 5-hour window, So I think that's you have to kind of go get your errands done early in the morning, and then you have to just sit around and are they going to show up right at 12 or are they going to show up at 4:55, right? And they're not having any kind of insight on the progress. I know from my perspective, that continues to be as a consumer, my biggest pet peeve, if you will, with any kind of home delivery. Now you mentioned e-commerce. So obviously e-commerce, we saw this big spike in growth during the height of the pandemic. And now, like you said, we're kind of seeing a slowdown in that growth. So, you kind of mentioned it. So has this slowdown kind of given retailers and delivery companies kind of a little bit of a room to breathe to improve delivery performance? And so what's been kind of the impact of e-commerce, in terms of overall, in terms of demand and performance around home delivery?
Well, part of the study that we do is we ask consumers about let's call it what percentage of their purchases, so overall, that they're making that are online and where they get a home delivery, because you can still buy online and pick it up at the store as an example and so forth, right? So and it's in the 40s. But what was interesting was last year's study said it would go up by a couple points. It actually went backwards in terms of what people came back and said what they did this year. But yet again, the outlook for the future is that they're going to do more. So that to us says that it's in the back of people's minds. And maybe just a couple points to cover, like the top reasons are convenience, all right, and they've gotten used to the convenience, and that companies have done a good job. E-commerce companies have done a good job of making the buying process easier, right? Now, one other real interesting point is that you really need to look at e-commerce from a demographics perspective, right? So age, is an interesting one, and the biggest pickup is in older people. All right, and so what did the pandemic do, right? It really exposed some people who may not be inclined to buy certain products online. Okay, and I would tell you that's mostly older folks. That all of a sudden they started doing it, and wow, this was not a bad thing, right? And so they're still doing it. So it's really kind of changed buying behaviors. So I think by no means, at least in what we're seeing, is that we're now the pandemic is subsiding, that we're going to see any kind of regression.
Yeah, well, I can count my mom for sure as being in that demographic. I mean, I think she went from being kind of a non-user of e-commerce, and over the past 3 years, she's now a power user of e-commerce. And sometimes for to my sister's dismay, and this is probably a topic for another day, but probably about 50% of what she buys, she ultimately decides that she wants to return. And of course, it's up to my sister then to figure out how to return it on her behalf. So certainly returns is part of this whole equation as well. But I think we'll table that for a different discussion. So at the end of the day, I mean, why does home delivery performance matter for delivery and for retailers and delivery companies? I mean, at the end of the day, what are the consequences of poor delivery performance?
Well, that's something else we definitely looked at, and so we asked consumers to look at it from the perspective of what did it matter to them? Were they going to do something different? And so everything from how did they feel about the retailer? Did they lose trust in the retailer? Did they decide that they're not going to buy from this retailer? Did they decide if they have a choice, are they not going to use the delivery company? Did they tell other people, family, friends? Did they post online? These are all the retailers' nightmares, right? So and as you said up front, if you get this wrong, all that great stuff you did could really lead to consumers who they may still buy from you, they may buy less, they may go to other folks. So we think there's a huge consequence here, really to long-term loyalty of customers and ultimately revenue and profit for retailers.
I mean, I think that there's a brand impact as well, and it's sometimes particularly for the retailers, because it used to be that, hey, if you had a bad delivery experience or any kind of bad experience, well, your immediate friends and folks that you talk to will be the only ones that would know, because you would see them at dinner or whatever the case might be, and you would just share, oh gosh, I just had a bad experience. But now it's social media, everyone's posting and broadcasting bad experiences. And just this week I saw, I think it was on Twitter, someone posted a video of a delivery gone awry, if you will. I won't mention the retailer, but they were doing a home delivery on behalf of a retailer, and the delivery company, let's just say, was not doing a responsible job. But again, it's at the end, the buck stops with the brand owner, which is in this case the retailer. And now, because of social media, that gets amplified to a much broader audience than than in the past. So companies spend so much time and money and effort to build their brand and project a type of trust and worthiness and so forth. And sometimes these types of experiences can have a very big negative effect and lose a customer for life because of that.
Yeah, we've seen I'll call it definitely some higher end brands even do things like establish their own courier networks for dense areas, because they were really concerned about the quality of delivery during the pandemic. And that was exactly it. It was about the brand, and they did not want it damaged.
Yeah, and you see that that's another debate, right? Do you own delivery, right? Is this something that you build out your own network and your own drivers or capabilities and so forth, or is this something that you partner up with third parties, to manage? And I think there's pros and cons,
Yep.
in each of those options. So in the research, and I know this is something actually in some of the writings, guest commentaries that you've done for Talking Logistics, you've talked about, consumers having different delivery personas. I mean, so I guess, for folks that haven't heard that term before, what is a delivery persona, and how can retailers use them to improve customer loyalty and revenue?
Well, let's start with maybe, I think most people will know about buying personas, right? And retailers that would jump on this one in a heartbeat. It's what they do. They know that every customer is not the same, and they look at them and break them into classes, and they market and sell to them specifically based on what they think their buying behavior is. Well, there's delivery behavior, all right? And consumers don't think and act monolithically when it comes to delivery. So we wanted to test that. And because we've seen our customers do some pretty unique things in that space. And so what was really interesting was if you think about, I'll give you just we have 5 classes of delivery personas real quickly. The first one is cost. You have people that they don't care about anything other than the lowest cost option. Slow can be slow as whatever, they'll take it for that. All right. The second one is what we call parcel mentality. It's quick, but you don't know exactly when it's going to show up. Someday tomorrow, today, or someday tomorrow. Talk about 2 to 3 day deliveries as an example. Next one is around precision. All right, precision matters. Think of that in terms of things like furniture, just like you were talking, Adrian. Furniture, appliances, especially larger format goods, where you want it when you want it, right? And actually, speed sometimes is exactly what you don't want. You buy a new kitchen appliances, you don't want them the day that you buy them. You want them at some point in the future when your contractor's got the kitchen at a point where, like, they'll bring them in. Otherwise, for instance, it'll just, if you have a garage, it's going to tie it up. If you don't have a garage, you have nothing to know where to put it, right? So that's some of them. There's 2 others, right? The next one is a real important one, which is there's a class of people out there where time is their currency. In other words, they're time rich or time poor and money rich, excuse me. So for those folks, that's where things like you see speed and precision out there, and those folks typically, and as well as we see some of the others, will actually pay a premium for that privilege, right? And then the last one is one that we've been doing. We did a study last year on environmental impact and home delivery, and it's around sustainability. And there's an increasingly larger class of people who want to have their home delivery be as environmentally friendly as possible, and they will make decisions on that. And those decisions could include being more costly, could be slower, but they want to know that they're making an impact. And this is where home delivery does get a rap in consumers' perceptions of it's not necessarily as eco-friendly as people might think. So thinking about all of what I just said is if you're able to offer choices to your customers, all right, for delivery, you can find the following things as a retailer, all right? One is you can lower your delivery costs. And that's one of the things that we did look at, right? We asked consumers if they were interested in things like bundling up orders, right? And have them delivered on either a given day or when the retailer happened to say that they're going to be in the area. There's almost 50% of the people, right, that said they were interested in it. We looked at things like, would you like the retailer to present the most eco-friendly delivery options? So there might be options, but to score them and say this particular one is more friendly, right? Again, that 50% type range. And then we also asked things like, would you pay more for precision? All right. So that whole notion of like an hour window versus your all day window, right? As an example, right? And it's a smaller number. Okay. let me give you one other one, then I'll come back to this in a second. And we also asked about value-added services. All right, would you be willing to pay for things like installations as opposed to do it yourself? And a classic one is you buy a 55-inch TV, and or maybe these days 65 or 80, right? And would you like it mounted on the wall, right? And have that all taken care of, and plug it in, get it on the on cable or whatever, and get it working, and pay for that privilege, right? So that one again, low 20s, right? So you would think that between a tighter time window and that value-added service, you would think those are low numbers, but that's actually the real numbers, okay? And when I say that, this is what we see with our customers. Now, here's the wild part. This is millions of dollars, and it doesn't take a lot of consumers wanting these kinds of options. So if you net it all out, you can use delivery personas to do what? Top line growth, okay? Reduce your costs, so improve the bottom line, and then you can also combine the two of them. So that whole thing around, for instance, grouping orders, that's environmentally friendly, right? So instead of like having 3-4 deliveries in a week, you get it down to one. That's, less carbon footprint, right? That's a great thing. Consumers happy. As a retailer, you should be plenty happy if your customers are willing to take these kinds of eco-friendly options, because it's going to be less cost to you. We've seen 20% less miles per delivery as an example in doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that that's fascinating. I mean, I think the key takeaway is that there's no one size fits all delivery approach or expectations out there. I mean, when you read so much about, I think today everyone talks about retailers and delivery companies building out infrastructure for same day or next day delivery. But I mean, I think as you just went through, fast or next day is not necessarily something everybody wants, right? So, for some, there's the whole speed versus cost versus environmental. So there's a lot of different elements of the delivery process that, matter depending on who you are, where you are, and so forth. And I think that's one of my key takeaways of all this is that it's not just about speed versus cost. It's there's just much more, to that. I mean, your thoughts on that? I mean, what does one particular persona seem to be, is it everything, it just seems that the rhetoric out there is that everybody wants it fast and they want it as fast as possible, but that doesn't seem to bear out in the research.
No, it doesn't. And to your point about what the rhetoric in the market is, the term you would hear is fast and free, right? And I would love to have a magic eraser to be able to get those words and just erase them out of the conversation. If you ask that question to a consumer, would you like it fast and free? Would they ever say no? Right? Okay. But in reality, that's not how they act, and it's not how retailers act. So what we did was we asked one specific question where we had trade-offs. Would you like it lowest cost and time and speed is not so important? Would you like it as fast as possible, but cost is less important? Would you like it to be more precise, right? And cost is not important, right? As an example, and we went through all of that, and it netted out the following, which is by far people care about cost. That's the first thing. The interesting thing is speed is number 3, all right, and precision, it matters more than speed, right? So let's just say tomorrow doesn't matter if it's all day. To your point, you don't know when you get it. The following day or the day after that, if you can get it in an hour window, that matters more. All right. So we thought that was really interesting, and this is just I think an education opportunity for the retail world in terms of just looking at how you frame the questions to get to the real answers. Because when we look at what the retailers are doing, especially the ones that are successful in this space, is they've kind of figured that out, and they've tailored those personas to address the most prevalent ones of the ones we talked about for their consumers. And I'll just give you a great example. We work with a company in the UK called Halford's Mobile Expert. They do dynamic delivery appointment scheduling. So they have windows, and what it is for is tire replacement. You buy them online, they actually show up and they do it at your place, right? They do a couple things that would scare many retailers, right? One of them is that that they basically dynamically price slots. All right. So they actually say 2 o'clock tomorrow is £5, but 4 o'clock tomorrow is £12. And it has to do with other orders that they have and what they expect the cost will be to actually get to you, right? The other thing they do along with that is they also now move to that whole notion of a green, eco-friendly delivery. I'll call it notification. It's on the options that they present, right? Many people would say, "Oh my God, that's your consumers aren't going to like this. They're not going to want to know what prices are and other things, right?" They have one of the highest ratings on Trustpilot of anybody in the world, and so what they're doing is really making it a choice for their customers. And that's maybe the last thing I'll say about this, which is it's not about finding like one persona and sticking with it. That's, by the way, what every retailer does today and gets wrong. It's about finding the 2, 3 or 4 that make the most sense and allowing your customers to self-select, right? When they do that, it's their choice whether they want to spend more money. It's their choice if they want to wait longer. It's their choice if they want value-added services, as an example. So this is where we think the huge upsides is. So happy customer, more money, less cost.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think options and transparency, I think, are the 2 key points there. So Chris, I mean, again, a lot more in the research report. Again, we'll include the link at the end here for folks to be able to download it. But maybe as a way to summarize, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, what will separate the leaders from the laggards in home delivery moving forward?
Well, I think there's a couple things. First one is got to get better at keeping your promises, right? So again, this gets back to the fast is not as important as reliable. All right, the consumer expectation is really or sentiment is tied to that expectation you're going to make it. The biggest issues we saw were around people not making their delivery promises from a timing point of view, right? So I think that's a real important one. I think the second thing is that given how I'll call it the high level of challenges that consumers have been facing, this 2/3 having a problem in a 3-month period, right? Being that reliable, being consistent, all right, and then looking at that from the point of view of these personas and adding value there. We think that this can become something that is really in the arsenal of the retailer. And I don't know any retailer CEO that wouldn't kill for top line growth or better margins, and all of these things are about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, we'll continue to see, innovation and, progress in this area, because I think the data shows that there's significantly rooms for improvement still, despite all the attention that this is getting. And I think that what you said earlier, I think is a key piece, is that, if you ask all consumers, do you want it fast and free? Of course, they're all going to say yes. But it's not that simple. And, understanding what really matters to consumers, and then building the processes and having the technology to enable some of these choices and transparency and so forth, I think is going to be an important part of the puzzle moving forward as well. Well, Chris, as always, appreciate you making the time to be with us today and sharing your thoughts and perspective on this topic, and certainly look forward to having you in another episode down the road.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure as always, Adrian. Thanks so much.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Descartes website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Chris, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.